Morning, everybody. The next thing we're going to talk about are taps and dies and how that relates to this project. So what we want to do is cut internal threads in the hammerhead, okay? And then we're going to cut external threads on the hammer handle. And that's going to allow us to take that project and fasten it together using threads. So we're going to thread the handle into the hammerhead, and then that's going to work like that, okay? So we need to determine first the type of threads that we want to cut. So the directions say we want to cut 3/8 16 threads. So let's take a look at that real quick. So the thread we're going to look at is 3/8 16 UNC. And that's what it'll appear as when you normally look at thread types. So 3/8 is the diameter of the thread. Okay, the finished diameter of the thread. 16 stands for threads per inch. And UNC means Unified National Course. So there are two different types of threads for standard measure. There are coarse threads and fine threads. So Unified National Course. The other type is UNF, Unified National Fine. Okay, so any type of threads that are in the inch type of category, they're going to be either UNC or UNF. There's also another type of threads called pipe threads. That's a whole other animal. They're tapered. There's some different things like that. We'll talk about those later. So what we're going to do for this project is 3/8 16 threads, okay, and those are UNC. Now, sometimes there's also a third number after our 16, and that is the tolerance of the thread. So we'll bump it over. Sometimes it's 1, 2, etc., and we'll call that the tolerance. The tolerance is how tight the bolt or the threads are going to fit inside of the hole. So that's something else we have to look at. So this is the size we want to use, 3/8 16. Now we need to determine the size hole that we drill. So hold on just 1 second and we'll show you how we come up with that. So over next to the drill press, there is a decimal metric equivalent chart. There's a drill chart included with this. And on the right-hand side, there is a thing that says tap drill sizes. Okay, and depending on the size thread we want to have, this chart is going to tell us what size drill bit we need to use. Okay, so if you look at the bottom left-hand corner here, which says 3/8 16 threads, we want a 5/16 drill bit. Okay, those drill bits are correlated with that so that when we go to cut our threads, there is enough material on the inside of that hole to actually cut. Okay, now you will see on here there are different numbers, and there's also letters for drill sizes. Sometimes if you don't know what it is or can't come across it, you can come over to the chart and see what it is. So for instance, if we look at a, let's say we want a number 36 drill bit, 1065. If I can't find a number 36, I can usually bump up to 7/64 right above it. We're only talking about, several thousands difference, 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths difference. Okay, so that is here, that tells us. This is also in the textbook. That's something that's listed in there in the, I think it's called hand threading chapter. So that's there for reference. So 5/16 drill bit for 3/8 16 threads. So let's prepare, let's grab our taps out, and we'll see you back in just a second. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are the three different types of taps that we can use for this project. So the first tap is this one here. It's called a taper tap. If you look at the very bottom of this, there are very few threads towards the bottom. There's quite a bit of a taper to the tap. And what that's going to do is help us start that tap. Okay, so that'd be tap number 1 we'd use. The second tap is called a plug tap. Notice there are a little bit more threads at the bottom of this. So this would be our second tap that we would use. Okay. okay, it's going to cut our threads a little bit deeper. This is actually just a little bit bigger in diameter on the exterior compared to this one, so it's going to make a little bit deeper thread. The last type of tap is optional for this project because it's a through hole. This is called a bottom tap, and if you look, there are threads almost all the way to the very bottom of this tap. So this would be the three, if we were going to drill a hole and tap it, that was called a, it's not a through hole. If we're going to do what's called a plug. So if we were going to drill a hole that was a through hole, we could get away with taps 1 and 2 and using those in that order. If I was going to do what's called a blind hole, where the hole doesn't go all the way through the work, I would use the first 2 and then I would use the last tap to thread all the way down to the bottom of the project. So that's what those 3 look like, that's what they are. We're also going to instill the use of the tap wrench, that's this thing right here. We're going to put our tap inside of that and we're going to hold it, okay? And we also have some cutting fluid here. We're going to use this to lubricate our material as we go to tap it. So here's our hammerhead. We're going to get set up here and we're going to show you folks how to put some threads in this thing. Okay, so to first thread this, we want to take our work, we're going to put this inside of a vise. And I prefer that you use the aluminum jaw vices. So the table closest to the door, the exterior door for the shop, use these. They have an aluminum insert in them. It's not going to put dents inside your project. Next thing we're going to do, just a little bit of a measure here to help you out. You're going to take a level, put that on your project, and make sure it's in the vise so that the bubble of the level is in the center of your project, okay? Now there is a difference between level and square. This is just going to help us get it a little bit closer, okay, rather than just freehanding it in there. So we're going to take our first tap, which is our taper tap. We're going to put that inside of our tap wrench. So we're going to unscrew the handle here and we're going to tighten this up. Now there's also smaller tap wrenches. We're doing, for the cut that we're going to do, we're going to be cutting a lot of material out of here. So this wouldn't be ideal because it has a very short handle on it. There's not a whole lot of leverage there, so we're going to move to the bigger tap wrench, okay? I'm going to take and put a little bit of cutting oil on the tap itself, and then I'm going to put just a little bit around the hole, okay? Now I'm going to take my tap wrench, I'm going to push down, and I'm going to turn clockwise. And we're going to go just a few turns here to get this thing started. And we're going to back it out. Now, if this thing's jumbling around all over the place, try and keep it steady. If you think it'll help you, take your level, put it on the top of your tap wrench, and you can run this as you're cutting that, okay? Just to kind of keep you guided. The first few are difficult, but using the taper tap, it makes it just a little bit easier. So once the first couple threads get established here, we're pretty much committed to threading this with how you have it set up. So now it's getting just a little bit easier. Notice on the tap wrench as I'm operating this, 2 fingers to pull, 2 fingers to push. We don't want to use excessive force when we are running this. Okay, taps are made of extremely hard material. They can snap very easily. So now I'm going to back this out. And there's quite a bit of metal shavings in and around this thing. Okay, and you can see on here there's a bunch of metal shavings. I'm going to take probably just a wire brush here. We're going to brush those off. Okay, and I do have a couple little shavings on the inside of the hammerhead. I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver. I'm going to give that a little bit of a spin. Okay, so we're going to take this, we're going to reset it, we're going to go back in, and we're going to cut just a little bit further down with this. Once we go a little bit further, we're going to switch and move to our plug tap, which is our second tap, and we'll continue to cut it, okay? And I'm going to put just a hair of cutting oil on here. Okay, you should never have to force a tap when you're threading a hole. If you have to force it, something's wrong. Back it out, clean it out, check it, do something. If you force it, you're more than likely going to break the tap off in the project, and that's a problem. Okay, so a few more revolutions here. We're now going to back this out. If this is a blind hole that wasn't all the way through, and we continue to go, normally what happens is the metal shavings go into the bottom, fill that hole in, and then you'll actually cut the threads back out of it because the tap can't go any further through the material and it doesn't have anywhere to go. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper here. When you get it start it easy. Don't force it, because you'll recut your threads back up. Okay, there we go. So we're in some resistance here. We're just about to the end of the tap. There's about a 1/4 inch, or about 5 threads left on the tap, which right there we're about bottomed out. Okay, we're out of threads on this tap. So what we're going to do next is, let's clean this off first before we get too excited here. Okay, metal shavings. We're going to take this tap out of the tap wrench, and we're going to move to our second tap, which is our plug tap. So we're going to do this with, start with a clean hole and do new threads. You can also use this to clean up old threads. So for instance, there's a Chevy 350 engine block in this room. A friend of mine gave that to me. It needs rebuilt. Fair bringing it for you guys to take a look at. Before we would put any parts back on that motor, we want to chase the threads or clean the threads up with a tap. And what that's going to do is give us accurate torque readings. We got to tighten down all the bolts to put the heads on, the intake manifold, exhaust manifolds, oil pump, different things like that. We want to have an accurate torque. We got to tighten those up. Okay, over the years, oil, grease, dirt, things are inside of those threaded holes, and it's not going to give us an accurate reading. We got to tighten those bolts down, so we can tighten those up. So that's our plug tap. We're through with this one. Now that one I went all the way through with it, because we're not cutting a whole lot of material, just towards the end there. And we can run the bottom tap on this, even though it is a through hole. We can still run a bottom tap, that's not an issue. This tap's just gonna clean those threads up. Don't forget to put the cutting oil on the tap. Okay, very important. It's gonna reduce friction, it's gonna keep our tap sharp, generally help things out. Now this is going very easy, as you can see. At the end here, we'll probably hit just a little bit of resistance. Yep, right there. And that's it. So if I can take this out of the vise just to show you what this looks like. That tap is actually coming out of the bottom of there. Okay, so our threads are cut completely through the material. So let's back this out. We'll clean this up, and we will talk about dies and threading the handle. Okay folks, we have one more thing to do to the hammer handle. We didn't finish this step when we originally did this. We need to take and cut a 1/2 inch of material off the end. So if you remember, we center drilled both ends of this handle, and we cut the center drilled end off the handle portion when we did the facing cut after we knurled it. So we need to take and cut a 1/2 inch of material off. So I'm just going to take a hacksaw with no power on the lathe. We're going to take and we're going to cut the end of this off. Okay? Light pressure. Don't push and pull too hard. You'll actually take and bend the handle. So let the saw glide across the material. This aluminum is very easy to cut. It's not very difficult. The hacksaw should cut through here like butter. Also, please make sure that your knurling has a piece of paper wrapped around it. You remember back in the lathe video, anytime we put material inside of the chuck that was finished, we took and wrapped a piece of paper on there so we don't put impressions or mess up that knurling. Okay, so we're just about through here. Okay, so our material is now cut. We're now going to take a white handle file, and these are hanging on the back side of the cart with the buffers and the belt sanders. We're going to take this, and we're going to simply just file this flat. These white handle files are specific for cutting aluminum. They have a different, little different pattern to them. Okay, once we have our material flat, the last thing we want to do is file a chamfer on the outside edge of this, and that's going to help us start the threads. So for this process, we wouldn't have the lathe on. We want the chuck to be spinning. So free spin first, make sure we're clear, power on, clutch up. You go to hold the file. We want to take and put our left hand at the bottom of the file, right hand on top of the file. We're going to put this on roughly a 45-degree angle, and we're going to make about a dozen forward passes. Please make sure the carriage, tool post, everything is pushed over to the right. We don't want anything in the way as we go through this process. Okay, so we did about a dozen passes. And you can now take a look and see the end of this. So we cut the center drill off the end, and we have a chamfer. So the next step, we're going to take this over to the vise in the front, and we're going to thread the outside of this. Okay, folks, the next thing we're going to do is thread our handle. Now, one thing we'll do, we're just going to double check the threads on our hammerhead. So I took a bolt, a 3/8 bolt. We just want to make sure that we can take our bolt and thread that into the project. And we should be able to use our finger. We don't need a wrench, a ratchet, anything of that sort. So, okay, it goes right there to the top. So that's good. Our threads are ready to rock and roll there. Now, what we want to do with our handle, just how we previously had done, we want to take and wrap our handle, our knurling, with some paper, so that acts as a pad. And we're going to place this into a vise. Okay, so handles in the vise. We also want to take and make sure this thing is straight up and down, so or plumb. So let's grab a small level here. Just double check that. Tighten this up. Do not do this in a metal jaw vise. You have to use the table by the tool cupboard by the front door. Otherwise, you could potentially damage your project. So inside is our die, and this is our die stock. We're going to place this on top, and we're going to turn that to cut our threads. We do want to make a mark on here of 1 inch because we want to go 1 inch deep. That's going to thread all the way to the tip of the hammerhead. So I'm just going to use a scratch all, a roller to mark that. You can use a pencil or marker or something like that. A little bit of cutting oil. We're going to take and put this right on the tap. Also grab your die. Make sure the die is clean too. Make sure there's nothing on it. Also put a little bit of cutting oil on the top of there. Die stock goes on top of the work, just how we previously did with the tap. We're going to turn this clockwise, and it's going to start to thread. Okay, a little bit of downward pressure also as you're doing this. Remember, we're taking a bare piece of round stock and we're turning it and putting threads on it, so there's going to be a little bit of resistance. We're going to do a few revolutions with this, then we're going to back it off, clean out our die, just how we'd previously done with the tap. Okay, there's a lot of shavings that come off for this step. You can see them starting to hang and dangle from the bottom. So let's back this off one time. Okay, you can see the beginning of my threads. They look pretty clean. We'll put a little bit more cutting oil on here. And there's a lot of shavings inside of our die. So I'm going to take just a little flathead screwdriver here, clean those out. You could use compressed air for this. I'm not a big fan of compressed air here in the shop because we don't want to make this stuff airborne. Okay. Okay, start this very easy on top of here. Okay. And we'll continue to cut. So we're roughly a third of the way there. We're going to keep an eyeball on our line. See where we're at. Tighten our vise up just a little bit more. It's starting to work a little loose. And let's check our top here. Get a little further down. Right, remove it again. I have quite a bit of shavings in the underside of this. We don't want those to hold up on our cutting process here. Okay. double check our dimension here. I think we gotta go just a hair further. Yeah, probably, once it hits, I think we'll probably get another 1 or 2 revolutions. We gotta put this thing together. If the threads stick out just a little bit out of the top, that's not the end of the world. We can take a file and file down the end of our handle. So once it touches, like I said, we'll do just a couple more revolutions. I think that'll do it. So we're going to take and thread the head on next. Do not force the hammerhead onto this. I've had students over the years, they'll take a wrench, a pipe wrench, a crescent wrench, and they start hammering it on there. It's not what we want to do. They should thread on relatively easy, so let's do that. Shouldn't have to go crazy on it. Okay, that's screwing on. We're just about to the top here. And it looks like I could actually cut probably, it's just not quite flush. We need to go like 1 or 2 more threads. So we'll just take the time right now and do it. There's no sense in skipping. So to thread it nice and easy. We do not want to ever force that. So the aluminum is softer, obviously, than the steel. So if there's something wrong with the steel, the aluminum is going to deform first, and it's going to cause problems. So we don't want to screw up our aluminum threads there. So we do aluminum for the handle because it's very easy to machine. It's easy lathe work. It's easier on this, on the hand cutting, on the sanding, filing, things like that. So that's why we do it. All right, here we go. Let's do a couple more here. Okay, that should take care of it. Are the right side up. And also we're going to make sure these are square, so my handle's not on some goofy angle. It's not sitting like this. There we go. So I actually probably got a little too excited with it. And we have about, I don't know, maybe not even an 1/8 inch sticking up over the top. We'll take and cut those off of there during the sanding operation. So the next thing we're going to do with this, well, obviously we'll take and cut this off, make it flush. We're going to disassemble this. We're going to sand this portion of the handle. We're going to sand the hammerhead, and we're going to buff this portion of the handle and buff the hammerhead. So that's what's coming up next. Okay, we're going to take and cut our extra couple. Looks like we're cutting off about 1.5 threads. So once again, the aluminum is very soft. It's going to cut very easy. It's not going to be difficult. And the top of the hammerhead is actually going to keep our saw close to the material. Okay, so you can see we're now flush. There is a little bit of material sticking out. We're going to take a file here. And we're just going to file right along the top of this hammerhead, and that's going to make it flush. Okay, there's just a little bit sticking out. We have that squared away now. Okay, so I'm going to show you folks how to sand. We'll see you over at the sanding table.